My name is Robert Miller. I'm 48 years old, and the phrase that beggar said Tom still echoes in my head like a warning that I didn't want to hear in time. I helped him almost every day, always at the same time, near my house, a simple gesture that was part of my routine. That morning when I held out the money, he didn't immediately thank him. He raised his face slowly, looked me in the eyes with an uncomfortable lucidity and said in a low and firm voice, "Lord, be careful not to become homesick." That crossed me in a strange way. It was not pity. It was not common fear. It was a dry chill, one of those that don't match the weather or the moment. I forced a smile. I thought it was just a loose phrase, something said by someone used to watching the world go by. I went on my way, but something inside me had already changed. As I walked back, I felt a pressure in my chest, as if I was being watched. I looked around. Everything seemed too normal. Houses lined up, cars parked, neighbors going about their routines. Still, the phrase kept hitting my mind. To become homesick. That sounded definitive. I am a financial auditor. I have been working for decades analyzing risks, predicting collapses and identifying scams before they materialize. I have always trusted in my ability to read scenarios, but at that moment something told me that I'd ignored obvious signs for too long. When I arrived in front of my house, I felt another stronger shiver. The door was unlocked. This was not common. I entered slowly, calling my wife. No response. The house was too quiet. I climbed the stairs carefully, feeling my heart racing for no apparent reason. It was then that I noticed small details out of place. Documents that I used to keep organized were scrambled. A half-open drawer. My personal notebook out of the usual position. Nothing screamed immediate danger, but everything indicated an internal invasion. That hadn't been done by strangers. He was someone who knew the house. Someone who knew exactly where to look. I went downstairs again and went to the kitchen. My wife appeared smiling, as if nothing was happening. He said that he had left earlier, that everything was normal. Her tone was too light, too controlled. I knew that smile. I had already seen it in investigations, in testimonies of people who believe they are winning. I felt my stomach turn. At that moment, I understood that the beggar's warning was not about direct violence. It was about something slower, quieter, a process of erasure. I sat at the table pretending normality, while my mind began to connect old dots. Loose comments, strange expenses, sudden changes in behavior. Situations in which I was treated as someone outdated, almost a burden. I've always attributed it to the age difference, to the dynamics of the relationship. Now he began to see something else. A plan. Careful preparation. She talked, laughed, served coffee, and I watched every gesture with renewed attention. I realized that it was not sloppiness. It was method. At that moment, I didn't confront it. I didn't ask any questions. I just listened. I learned early on that those who reveal the game too early lose the advantage. While she was talking about trivial things, I remembered the phrase said on the street, "Be careful not to become homesick." This was not about physical death. It was about being discarded, replaced, erased from one's own history while still alive. And the most disturbing thing was to realize that this was happening inside my own home, with someone who shared a bed with me. I finished breakfast, thanked her, went up to the office and closed the door. I opened my files, reviewed accounts, accesses, records. I began to see movements that I had previously ignored out of trust. Small but frequent transfers, signatures that I didn't remember authorizing. Everything is very well diluted, as if you know exactly how far you can go without attracting attention. I felt a chill in my hands. It wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was something bigger, something that, if completed, would leave me exactly as the beggar said, just a convenient souvenir. That day I understood that I had been watched for a long time, not on the street, but within my own life. And I also realized that if I didn't act precisely, there would be nothing left but badly told stories about me. The warning had been given. The game had begun. After I closed the office door that morning, I was no longer the same man who had left home minutes earlier to help someone on the street. What I began to see there was not the result of imagination or paranoia. It was standard, and patterns have been the basis of my work for more than 20 years. I am a financial auditor in the United States, specializing in dismantling schemes that hide behind common routines. Normal people, normal companies, Normal marriages. It always starts like this. Small, justified exceptions. Decisions made for practicality. Trust used as anesthesia. I had seen this movie hundreds of times. I just never imagined that I would be the protagonist. I began by reviewing everything silently, without changing my behavior outside that room. I kept my schedules, my answers short, my neutral stance. Meanwhile, at night, when the house was quiet, I would cross-check data. Cards that I hardly used were spent at odd hours. Joint accounts had movements that did not match the historical pattern. Nothing blatant, all calculated to look like noise. This type of scheme is not made to steal quickly. It is made to tire, confuse, and, in the end, justify the disposal. The person does not disappear all at once. It is gradually emptied until it accepts that it no longer has the strength to react. I started to observe my wife with different eyes. Every comment about my age, every joke disguised as worry, every time she said I needed more rest, that I had done enough in life. Before I saw it as care. Now it sounded like psychological preparation. She always put me one step behind, like someone who was already outdated. When I questioned something, she smiled and changed the subject. When I insisted, he said that I was becoming too suspicious. This is an old trick, to make the other doubt their own perception. A few days later, I found documents out of place again. Nothing explicit, only minor changes. An open envelope, a paper reloaded in the wrong way. It was as if someone wanted me to notice but wasn't sure if I was attentive enough. This is also strategy. Testing limits, measuring reaction. I didn't react. I just registered it in my mind. I continued to help the beggar every morning, but now I greeted him with silent respect. He never repeated the phrase, but his look seemed to say that the notice had already been delivered. At home, my wife started going out more. He said that he needed to unwind, that he had made new friends. He returned late, always in a good mood. Too good a mood for someone who says they are overwhelmed. I didn't question it. I just watched. On one of those nights, she left her unlocked cell phone on the table. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Those who do this expecting to be caught usually want to create a future narrative. I already had enough proof that something was afoot. What I needed now was to understand how far she intended to go. It was then that I realized something more serious. There were attempts to expose myself professionally, emails sent on my behalf with minor inconsistencies. Nothing that would cause an immediate scandal, but enough to raise doubts. That crossed a dangerous line. It was no longer just money, it was reputation. And reputation, in my field, is worth more than any bank balance. I felt the real weight of the situation at that moment. If I missed the reaction time, I would lose everything. If he acted too soon, he would give the game away. That night, sitting in the dark of the office, I thought again of the beggar's phrase. Not to become longing meant not to disappear as a man, as a reference, as someone whose absence is explained with convenient versions. I understood that this story was not about love that ended. It was about someone trying to rewrite my existence while I was still breathing, and that I couldn't allow. I decided then that I would do what I have always done best. Do not confront. Do not accuse. Do not ask for explanations. I would observe, record, compare, and expect the inevitable error, because every silent scheme depends on one thing: excessive confidence of those who believe that the other is already defeated, and she believed. She thought I was just a man over 40, tired, predictable, about to be put aside. Little did she know that I was still whole and attentive. I continued exactly as I planned, invisible on the outside, attentive on the inside. The following days were an exercise in patience. I woke up early, left at the same time, helped the beggar, came back, worked, had dinner, slept. Nothing has changed on the surface, but behind this common routine I began to assemble a silent dossier on my own life. I recorded dates, times, accesses. I created off-site copies of everything that mattered. Documents, contracts, bank histories, email records. I did it the same way I do when I suspect that a company is masking losses. Without fanfare, no confrontation, just letting the facts speak for themselves. One morning I found something that confirmed my suspicions. A request for a change in a life insurance policy. It had not been completed, but someone had started the process. My name was still there, but conditions changed subtly. Redistributed benefits, adjusted deadlines. Nothing rude, just like someone would if they believed I wouldn't notice. I was silent, but inside me something screamed. That was no carelessness. It was intention. And intention, when documented, becomes proof. I also started to observe who orbited around it. Conversations interrupted when I entered the room. New names mentioned with exaggerated naturalness. A friend I'd never seen, but who seemed to know too much about our routine. I didn't investigate people. I investigated patterns. And the pattern showed that she was confident. Too confident. People like this make mistakes not out of haste but out of oversecurity. A few weeks later, the mistake came. An email sent from my work account to an external contact with a doctored attachment. The kind of thing that could raise serious suspicions about my conduct. She didn't know that I had set up mirrored alerts. I saw the shipment in real time. I didn't interrupt. I didn't delete it. I just saved everything. Headers, IP, time. They had greed. I had the records. That night I sat in the living room with her as if nothing had happened. We had dinner together. She talked about her day. I heard. At that moment, I stopped being a victim. I became an observer. I realized that I didn't have to win by shouting. I just needed to let her go one step further. Those who believe that the other has already lost usually expose themselves alone. Her plan began to become clearer. Isolate my image. Create small doubts here and there. To set the stage for a future narrative in which I would be the problem. The tired man. Her husband was suspicious. The outdated professional. Everything very clean. Very organized. Almost admirable, if it were not directed against me. I remained silent, because they wanted to hurry. I had time. When I finally confronted the situation, it was not with words. It was with movement. I consulted a lawyer specialized in property and reputational fraud. I didn't tell the whole story. I only presented facts he understood immediately. He said that this was not unusual, that her mistake would be to try to speed up the outcome. People like this always try to speed up when they think they have won. And she tried. He proposed a mature conversation. He said that maybe it would be better for me to take some time, rethink my career, take care of my health. He talked about selling the house. He spoke of simplifying life. As I spoke, I saw the entire script. Fooling a company is easy. It is difficult to deceive someone who has been working with auditing for decades. I agreed to everything. I nodded. He said she was right. I saw relief on her face. There, I knew I was near the end. The next day, she discovered that some accounts were temporarily blocked, for verification only. No charges, no scandal, just an unexpected obstacle. She tried to disguise her discomfort. He couldn't. I remained calm, because my revenge would not be to fight. It would be letting her lose alone. The outcome did not come in the form of a shout or an argument. It came in the form of a formal meeting, with lawyers, documents, and silence. Her every attempt to explain herself was dismantled by objective records. Dates didn't match. Signatures did not check. The narrative she built did not stand up to reality. Sometimes the best answer is written in a notary's office. When it was all over, I left that room in one piece. Not triumphant, whole. I finally understood what the beggar meant. Not becoming nostalgia is not allowing them to erase who you are while you are still alive. If it were you, would she have trusted until she disappeared, or would she have waited for the mistake in silence? After that meeting, the house became too big, not for the physical space, but for the silence that remained. My wife left with few words and many papers, trying to maintain the posture that no longer convinced anyone. I sat for a few minutes, staring at the empty table, feeling the real weight of what almost happened. It was not relief. It was clarity. I hadn't beaten someone. I had only prevented them from erasing me. In the following days, I organized my life with the same coldness that I use at work. I separated accounts, reviewed contracts, changed accesses. No rush, no drama. People watching from the outside might expect anger, resentment, some kind of emotional breakdown. There was none. What happened was focus. When someone tries to dismantle you in silence, the best response is to recompose yourself with method. I continued to meet the beggar every morning. One day, without me saying anything, he just nodded his head when he saw me. We didn't exchange words. We didn't need to. Some messages do not need to be repeated to fulfill their role. I understood that that warning was not supernatural nor poetic. It was practical. People who go unnoticed learn to see what others ignore. At work, the attempts to tarnish my reputation died before they took shape. The record spoke for me. Colleagues who previously saw me as predictable started to look at me more closely, not out of fear, out of respect. I didn't explain anything. Those who need to explain too much have usually already lost. At night, alone in the now silent house, I thought about how much blind trust had almost cost me everything. Not just money, identity, history, name. I realized that many people are not destroyed by great tragedies but by small agreements made against themselves. Trusting too much. Ignore signals. Believing that routine is synonymous with safety. I didn't miss it. I continued to be present, whole, attentive. And I learned that silent justice does not make noise, but leaves deep marks on those who tried to manipulate the game. If there's one thing this story has taught me, it's that disappearing doesn't start when you disappear. It starts when you stop observing. And you, if you were in my place, would have confronted you at the first sign, or waiting in silence until the truth exposes itself. After all, I had to relearn how to live within my own routine. Not in the romantic sense of new beginning, but in the practical sense of reconstruction. The house remained the same, the furniture in the same place, the neighbors following their predictable schedules. What had changed was my position within that scenario. I was no longer someone who just occupied the space. I was present consciously. That changes everything. I spent weeks tweaking details that I had previously ignored. Small automatic contracts, old signatures, authorizations granted for convenience. Things that seem harmless when trust is intact, but that become weapons when someone decides to use them against you. I turned off everything that wasn't essential. I reduced the noise of my life. The fewer loopholes, the fewer false narratives can be built. Some people walked away. Others reappeared with curiosity, disguised as concern. I watched them all, not out of exaggerated distrust, but out of learning. When someone tries to erase you, you come to understand the value of those who remain without asking too much. Silence, I learned, is also a form of loyalty. At work, I received a proposal to take on a sensitive audit in another city. Before, I would have refused for convenience out of attachment to the domestic routine. This time, I accepted, not as an escape, but as an affirmation. I still had use. It still had clarity. He was still respected for what he delivered, not for the role he occupied within a worn-out marriage. This difference is fundamental. During this phase, I often thought about the fine line between trust and neglect. It's not about distrusting everyone. It's about not abandoning yourself to keep the peace. I realized that for years I gave in to small decisions to avoid friction, not out of fear, but out of tiredness. And prolonged fatigue makes us give up things that should not be negotiable. One night, when I returned from a trip, I found a letter left by her. There were no apologies or direct accusations, only justifications. Long, organized, almost technical explanations. I read everything carefully. I didn't feel angry. I felt confirmation. People who make real mistakes are usually brief. Those who build too many narratives are usually trying to convince themselves. I kept the letter in a simple folder, along with other documents from that phase. Not to against her, but to remember me. To remember the exact point at which I almost ceased to exist as a reference in my own life. This is something that is not forgotten. Over time, her name ceased to be associated with mine in formal conversations. There was no scandal, no public exposure, just parting ways. Silent justice has this effect. It does not humiliate in the public square, but it does not allow convenient versions either. Each one continues to carry what they have built. I went back to helping the beggar for months, until the day he was no longer there. He asked a nearby merchant who said he did not know where he went. I stood still for a few seconds in the same place as always. For the first time, I felt that cycle had closed. The warning had fulfilled its role. Some people appear in our lives just to keep us from disappearing. Today, when I look back, I don't think of betrayal as the central point of this story. I think of an ignored alert, in signs treated as exaggeration, on how easy it is to be pushed out of one's own narrative when you believe stability is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, neither affection, nor reputation, nor the place you occupy in the world. I'm still Robert Miller. I am 48 years old. I continue to work with numbers, patterns, and risks. But now I apply that to my personal life as well. Not with paranoia, but with responsibility. I learned that observing is not being cold. It is to be whole. If there is an end to this story, It is not in revenge or visible victory. It's in the fact that I didn't miss it. I did not allow them to explain my absence while I was still present. And that, in the end, is all that matters. Now tell me, if someone were little by little rewriting their history, would you realize it in time, or would you only understand it when it was too late?